In the twilight of Hollywood's golden age, one man stood taller than the rest literally and figuratively. Gregory Peck, the towering icon who embodied dignity and moral strength on screen, sat down for what would become one of his most revealing and final interviews. But here's what millions never knew. This wasn't just another celebrity chat. It was a profound farewell, a master actor's last bow before the curtain fell forever. Little did the world realize they were witnessing the end of an era. In 1999. As the world celebrated the new millennium, a quiet revolution was happening in documentary filmmaking. Academy Award-winning director Barbara Koppel had convinced Gregory Peck, then 83 years old, and increasingly private, to let cameras follow him on what he called his Evening with Gregory Peck tour. The resulting American Masters documentary, A Conversation with Gregory Peck, would air on PBS to critical acclaim, but somehow slipped through the cultural consciousness like smoke through fingers. This wasn't the Gregory Peck the world expected to see. Gone was the stoic Atticus Finch, replaced by a man of remarkable vulnerability and wit. For the first time in decades, Peck opened his heart completely, sharing stories he'd never told, regrets he'd never voiced, and wisdom earned through 5 decades of stardom. The man who'd made a career of playing moral pillars was finally showing the world his human foundation cracks, repairs, and all. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew him best. Here was Hollywood's most private star, choosing the most public medium, television, to reveal his most intimate thoughts. But perhaps that was always Gregory Peck's way, to surprise when you least expected it, to choose the harder path when the easier one beckoned. As he would tell Koppel's cameras, with that familiar twinkle in his eye, "I suppose I've spent my whole life being someone else. Maybe it's time to try being myself." Few understood the weight Gregory Peck carried through his legendary career. Born during the Great War, to a father who abandoned the family and a mother who struggled with mental illness, Eldred Gregory Peck learned early that strength wasn't given. It was forged in the fires of necessity. By 1999, as cameras rolled for what would become his cinematic swan song, Peck was ready to excavate those buried truths. "People see Atticus Finch and think they know me," he confided to the camera, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "But Atticus was who I aspired to be, not necessarily who I was." This admission, stunning in its honesty, revealed the chasm between public persona and private struggle. The man who'd played presidents, generals, and moral crusaders on screen had spent a lifetime wrestling with self-doubt and the imposter syndrome that plagued even Hollywood's most successful. The documentary captured Peck in unguarded moments, shuffling through his La Jolla home, pausing at photographs that triggered cascades of memory. His hands, once steady enough to aim a rifle in the guns of Navarone, now trembled slightly as he traced the faces of departed friends. "This business," he mused, "it gives you everything and takes everything in return. The trick is figuring out what's worth keeping." In that moment, viewers glimpsed not the movie star, but the man fragile, reflective, and startlingly human. As Koppel's cameras captured Peck's speaking tour, audiences across America heard stories that had never made it into fan magazines or studio biographies. These weren't the sanitized anecdotes of Hollywood publicity. These were raw, unfiltered memories from the last of the Golden Age giants. Peck spoke of Clark Gable's insecurity, of Ingrid Bergman's mischievous sense of humor, of the terror he felt working alongside legends who seemed larger than life. "Nobody tells you about the fear," Peck revealed during one intimate evening at the Barter Theater in Virginia, where he'd performed as a young man in 1940. "Every role, every take, you're convinced this is the one where they'll finally realize you're a fraud." The audience sat in stunned silence as one of Hollywood's most confident leading men confessed to decades of anxiety and self-doubt. It was like watching Superman admit he was afraid of heights, But perhaps the most shocking revelation came when discussing his relationship with the studio system. Peck, long considered one of Hollywood's most professional and compliant stars, revealed a rebellious streak that would have made James Dean proud. "I said no to more pictures than I made," he chuckled, "which probably wasn't the smartest business decision, but it was the right human one." Stories tumbled forth of battles with studio executives, of scripts thrown in trash cans, of a principled stand that cost him millions but preserved his artistic soul. Threaded throughout, the documentary was a love story that Hollywood had never properly told. The 44-year marriage between Gregory Peck and his second wife, Veronique. As cameras followed the couple through their daily routines, a profound intimacy emerged that was both touching and revealing. Here was not the typical Hollywood marriage of convenience, but a genuine partnership that had weathered every storm. Veronique, elegant and sharp-witted, served as both Peck's anchor and his most honest critic. "He likes to think he's the strong, silent type," she teased during one filmed dinner conversation, "but he's actually quite chatty once you get him going." The affection between them was palpable, a counterpoint to the loneliness that seemed to haunt so many of Peck's contemporaries. In an industry notorious for broken marriages, they had found something rare and precious. The documentary captured private moments that revealed this depth of their connection. Veronique gently correcting one of Greg's stories, him deferring to her superior memory, the way their hands automatically found each other during public appearances. "She saved me," Peck admitted in perhaps his most unguarded moment. "Not from drink or drugs or other women, but from myself, from the tendency to disappear into characters and never come back." It was a confession that reframed his entire career, suggesting that his greatest role was simply being a husband worthy of such devotion. No discussion of Gregory Peck could avoid the role that defined him and arguably burdened him for the rest of his life. As the documentary explored his relationship with Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, a complex picture emerged of an actor who had achieved perfect casting at the cost of his own identity. Peck spoke candidly about the pressure of embodying America's moral conscience, of having strangers approach him on the street, seeking wisdom he wasn't sure he possessed. Harper Lee wrote that Atticus Finch gave Gregory Peck a chance to play himself, he quoted during the interview, his voice thick with emotion. "But I think it was the reverse. Gregory Peck gave me a chance to become Atticus Finch." The distinction was crucial and heartbreaking. For nearly 4 decades, Peck had been living up to an ideal that wasn't entirely his own, carrying the weight of public expectations that would have crushed a lesser man. The documentary revealed that Peck had turned down numerous offers to reprise or revisit the Atticus Finch character, understanding intuitively that lightning doesn't strike twice. "Some things are perfect as they are," he explained, "and perfection is fragile. One sequel, one reunion special, and you risk destroying something beautiful." It was a wisdom born of experience, of watching other stars dilute their greatest achievements in pursuit of easy money or renewed relevance. Peck had chosen preservation over profit, integrity over opportunity. Barbara Koppel's documentary cameras captured more than just interviews. They documented the twilight of Hollywood royalty. Watching Peck navigate his daily life in 1999 was like observing the last dinosaur, a magnificent creature from a vanished world. The grace with which he signed autographs, the patience he showed with fans, the old-world courtesy that seemed almost alien in the brasher entertainment landscape of the late 1990s. The film revealed the meticulous care with which Peck prepared for his speaking engagements, watching his own films as if seeing them for the first time, taking notes in his careful handwriting about moments he wanted to discuss. "I'm still learning from that young man up there," he said, watching himself in Roman Holiday. It was a remarkable admission of humility from someone who had every right to rest on his considerable laurels. Most poignantly, the cameras captured Peck's relationship with his daughter Cecilia, herself a filmmaker. The generational passing of artistic DNA was evident in their conversations, in the way she framed questions that drew out his deepest insights. "She sees things I miss now," he admitted, acknowledging the natural order of creative succession. It was a father's pride, mixed with an artist's recognition that the torch would inevitably pass to younger, steadier hands. Throughout the documentary, Peck served as both participant and anthropologist, observing the death of the classical Hollywood system that had made him a star. His commentary on the modern entertainment industry was sharp but not bitter, analytical rather than nostalgic. "We were contract players," he explained, "which meant we were property, but we were also protected. Now everyone's free, but freedom can be a cold companion." The contrast between Peck's era and the 1990s entertainment landscape was stark. Where once stars were carefully cultivated over decades, the new system seemed to churn through talent at an alarming rate. Peck watched this transformation with the detachment of a scholar and the sadness of someone who had lived through better times. "They want instant gratification now," he observed, "but greatness requires patience, and patience requires time we seem unwilling to invest." His analysis extended to the craft itself. Documentary showed Peck watching contemporary films, his reactions ranging from admiration to bewilderment. "The technology is miraculous," he acknowledged, "but I sometimes wonder if we're using it to tell better stories or just louder ones." It was a question that would prove prescient as the industry continued its relentless march towards spectacle over substance, noise over nuance. As the documentary progressed, Peck's role evolved. From interview subject to inadvertent philosopher, dispensing wisdom earned through decades of triumph and disappointment. His advice to young actors was practical yet profound. Learn your lines, know your character, and remember that the camera sees everything, including what you're trying to hide. But his deeper insights transcended acting, touching on life itself. Success, he reflected during one particularly introspective moment, isn't about the applause. It's about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. For someone who had spent his career literally being looked at by millions, it was a remarkably grounded perspective. The documentary revealed a man who had managed to maintain his essential self despite the deforming pressures of fame. Perhaps most significantly, Peck spoke about failure, his own and others. "Every actor worth his salt has a graveyard of performances he'd like to forget," he admitted. "The trick is to bury them deeply enough that they don't haunt your future work, but not so deeply that you can't learn from them." It was a masterclass in resilience, delivered by someone who had survived 5 decades in an industry notorious for destroying its own. Away from the formal interview settings, Koppel's cameras captured Peck in his natural habitat, the comfortable homes in Los Angeles, and the south of France, where he and Veronique had built their real life. These glimpses behind the public facade revealed a man of surprising simplicity, more interested in gardening than glamour, more engaged by books than by show business gossip. The documentary showed Peck's morning routines, his careful reading of multiple newspapers, his methodical approach to correspondence with fans and friends. "Discipline," he explained, "isn't just for actors. It's for living." At 83, he maintained the same structured approach to daily life that had served him through decades of film productions, treating retirement as just another role requiring preparation and commitment. Most revealing were the quiet moments. Peck, tending to his garden, pausing to appreciate a sunset, sharing a private joke with Veronique. These were not performances, but authentic glimpses of a man who had learned to find satisfaction in simple pleasures. "The best parts of life," he mused, "don't require an audience." It was wisdom that seemed particularly hard-earned from someone who had spent most of his adult life performing for the entertainment of others. By 1999, Gregory Peck was no longer the strapping leading man who had conquered Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s. The documentary didn't shy away from the realities of aging, showing a man confronting his own mortality with the same dignity he had brought to his greatest roles. References to departed friends peppered his conversations: Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, Henry Fonda, each name carrying the weight of personal loss and professional legacy. "We're a vanishing breed," Peck acknowledged without self-pity, "and I sometimes wonder if the world will miss what we represented." It wasn't ego speaking, but genuine concern about the values he and his generation had tried to embody on screen: integrity, sacrifice, moral courage. The documentary captured him grappling with questions of legacy and relevance, wondering if the principles that had guided his career would survive in Hollywood's increasingly cynical landscape. Perhaps most powerfully, the film showed Peck's determination to remain vital despite his advancing years. His speaking tour wasn't just a victory lap, but a genuine attempt to connect with new generations, to pass along lessons learned in Hollywood's golden age. "I may not have much time left," he confided to the camera, "but I intend to use it well." It was a promise he would keep until his death in 2003, remaining engaged and relevant until the very end. The documentary became a repository for tales that Peck had kept private for decades, stories too personal for studio publicity, too revealing. For earlier interviews, he spoke of his struggles with depression after his first marriage ended, of the guilt he carried over his son's suicide, of the professional disappointments that had tested his resolve. These weren't the sanitized memories of a publicity tour, but the honest recollections of a man settling accounts with his past. One of the most powerful segments involved Peck discussing his relationship with his children from his first marriage. The camera didn't flinch from his admission of failure as a father, his acknowledgement that career success had come at a steep personal cost. "I was better at playing other people's fathers than at being my own children's father," he admitted, with devastating honesty. It was a confession that recontextualized his famous portrayal of Atticus Finch, suggesting it might have been as much aspiration as interpretation. The documentary also revealed Peck's complex relationship with his own image. He spoke candidly about the burden of being seen as Hollywood's moral center, of having to live up to public expectations that sometimes felt impossible to meet. "Everyone wanted me to be Atticus Finch," he reflected, "but Atticus Finch never had to worry about movie contracts or difficult directors, or whether his next picture would flop." The weight of perfection, it seemed, had been his most challenging co-star. Through Peck's eyes, the documentary painted a portrait of a Hollywood that no longer existed, a place where stars were groomed over years, where loyalty meant something, where the movies themselves aspired to be more than mere entertainment. His reminiscences about the studio system, despite its obvious flaws, carried a note of nostalgia for a more structured, perhaps more civilized approach to filmmaking. "We had time then," Peck observed. "Time to develop characters, time to rehearse, time to get things right." The contrast with the modern industry's breakneck pace was implicit but clear. He spoke wistfully of multi-week rehearsal periods, of directors who demanded multiple takes until perfection was achieved, of a system that valued craftsmanship over speed. "Now they shoot first and fix it later," he noted with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment at digital filmmaking's possibilities. The documentary captured Peck's ambivalence about his own legacy in this changed landscape. Would his kind of performance, subtle, internal, built on character rather than charisma, find an audience in the new century? "I hope so," he said simply, "but I suppose that's not for me to decide." It was a graceful acknowledgement of generational change, delivered by someone who had managed to remain relevant across multiple decades of shifting tastes and styles. As the documentary drew toward its conclusion, Peck's role shifted from storyteller to sage, offering insights that transcended Hollywood to touch on universal themes of life, love, and purpose. His advice wasn't delivered as pontification, but emerged naturally from conversation, the hard-won wisdom of someone who had lived fully and reflected deeply on the experience. The great lesson of acting, he explained, is that you can't fake sincerity. A camera sees through everything, every false emotion, every insincere gesture, every moment when you're not completely present. But the application went beyond. Performance. Life is the same way, he continued. People can sense when you're not being authentic, when you're playing a role instead of living your truth. The documentary showed Peck grappling with his own authenticity, questioning whether his public persona had become so ingrained that he'd lost touch with his essential self. After 50 years of being Gregory Peck, the movie star, he wondered. Aloud, I sometimes have to work to remember Greg the man. It was a profound observation about the cost of fame, delivered with the kind of self-awareness that made his greatest performances so memorable. Perhaps the most poignant aspect of the documentary was its accidental nature as farewell. Neither Peck nor director Barbara Koppel knew they were creating a final statement, a last glimpse of Hollywood royalty before the curtain fell forever. Viewed in hindsight, every moment carries additional weight, every story becomes more precious, every insight more valuable, every smile more bittersweet. The film's final scenes, showing Peck at home with Veronique, take on almost sacred significance when considered as among the last professionally filmed moments of his life. His gentle interactions with his grandson, his careful attention to correspondence, his obvious contentment with the simple pleasures of domestic life all become testament to a man who had learned what truly mattered after a lifetime in the spotlight. I've been luckier than I deserved, Peck reflected in one of the documentary's last interviews, and I hope I've been worthy of that luck. It was a statement of humility from someone who had achieved almost everything the entertainment industry could offer, yet remained grounded enough to recognize fortune's role in his success. As epitaphs go, it was both modest and magnificent, perfectly capturing the character of the man who had delivered it. A conversation with Gregory Peck ultimately became far more than its creators intended. What began as a simple documentary about an aging star's speaking tour evolved into a profound meditation on life, legacy, and the price of perfection. The interview format allowed Peck to control his own narrative one final time, to shape how he would be remembered by future generations, who might know his films, but not his story. The documentary's greatest achievement was its revelation of the man behind the myth. For decades, Gregory Peck had been Hollywood's moral center, the actor audiences trusted to embody their highest ideals. But the film showed something even more valuable, a human being struggling with the same doubts, fears, and hopes that define us all. His greatness lay not in his perfection, but in his acknowledgement of imperfection, not in his strength, but in his willingness to reveal vulnerability. As the credits rolled on this final interview, viewers were left with a sense of completion, of a story properly concluded. Peck had managed what few celebrities achieve. He had written his own ending, defining his legacy on his own terms. The boy from La Jolla, who had become one of cinema's most beloved figures, had found a way to say goodbye without calling it goodbye, to close the book on an extraordinary life while leaving the door open for discovery by future generations. Gregory Peck's final interview, hidden in plain sight on PBS in 1999, stands as one of television's most precious documents, a master. Class and grace under pressure, delivered by someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of being human on camera. 4 years before his death, the towering icon of American cinema opened his heart one last time, sharing wisdom earned through triumph and tragedy, success and sorrow. What makes this interview so remarkable isn't just what Peck revealed about himself, but what he showed us about the possibility of living with dignity in an undignified world. At 83, he remained curious about life, generous with his time, and honest about his failures. He had achieved something rarer than fame. He had maintained his essential goodness while navigating an industry that often rewards its opposite. The tragedy is that so few witnessed this final performance, this last glimpse of Hollywood's golden age through the eyes of one of its greatest ambassadors. But perhaps that's fitting for a man who always preferred substance to spectacle, meaning to publicity. Gregory Peck's final interview wasn't meant to be a blockbuster. It was meant to be the truth, quietly spoken by someone who had earned the right to be heard. As we remember the towering figure who gave us Atticus Finch, Captain Ahab, and countless other unforgettable characters, let us also remember the man who, in his final interview, gave us something even more precious himself, unguarded and authentic. One last time, what are your memories of Gregory Peck? Did you catch this rare interview when it first aired? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden stories from Hollywood's golden age. The legends may be gone, but their stories live on if we take the time to listen.